several months. This will also require political consensus and compromise among Somali leaders at the national level, both the executive and legislative, and particularly between the central government and federal member states on how best to advance. We look forward to the next meeting of the Somalia Partnership Forum in October, which will provide an opportunity for Somalia and its international partners to agree on the priority areas for action and to catalyze progress on Somalia's state-building priorities between now and the end of 2020. Madam President, the national electoral cycle in 2020-2021 offers an opportunity to advance decisively the process of democratization. Technical preparations continue to make progress. A draft electoral law is under review by the federal parliament, and the National Independent Electoral Commission is preparing for voter registration. I encourage Parliament's House of the People to expedite its review and adoption of the electoral bill, including further consultations to achieve broad political support. To that end, I welcome the resumption of cooperation between the two houses of Parliament. I also encourage the federal government to establish an electoral security coordination task force to develop the arrangements by which the election will be secured. We also urge that the empowerment of women in the political process should be enhanced. Even as we look ahead to national elections in 2020-2021, we must be attentive to electoral processes in the federal member states. We are following closely developments in Galmudug, where, with the support of the federal government of Somalia, a reconciliation forum is being put in place. We encourage this effort to achieve a broad-based consensus on Galmudug's electoral process. In Jubaland, we continue to urge a single, agreed, consensual electoral process, without which there is an increased risk of instability if there is a contested outcome. The UN and other international partners have pressed all sides to seek compromise on an agreed path forward, but time is now regrettably very short. Disorder in Jubaland would place in jeopardy not only gains made in that member state, but also many critical national priorities, including preparations for the 2020-2021 elections, the fight against Al-Shabaab, and the development agenda. Whatever the outcome in Jubaland tomorrow, I implore all stakeholders to show restraint, refrain from violence, and resolve grievances through dialogue. As noted at the beginning of my remarks, I visited Somaliland on July 27-28 and had informative consultations with its leaders. We continue to encourage dialogue between authorities in Hargeisa and Mogadishu and others, building on past efforts. Madam President, the federal constitution, once adopted, will provide a common vision for all Somalis, while defining clearly the respective roles of the organs of the federal state and relations with and between federal member states. Progress has been made in the technical authorities in Hargeisa, but Somalis now need to pursue an inclusive dialogue to reach agreement on outstanding critical issues, including the allocation of powers, intergovernmental relations, the system of governance, resource sharing, and the status of Mogadishu. Madam President, the security situation in Somalia remains a serious concern. The brutal Al-Shabaab attack on the Benadir Regional Administration on July 24th served as a painful reminder of the threat that terrorism poses to progress. I pay tribute to the victims of this and other attacks. Yet, there are encouraging security developments. Somali security forces, working with AMISOM, the United Nations, and international partners, are making progress in recovering and stabilizing areas of Lower Shabelle on the periphery of Mogadishu that had been held by Al-Shabaab. These operations have shown the effectiveness of this collaboration and reinforced the commitment of key security actors to the comprehensive approach to security. The operations are simultaneously supporting implementation of the transition plan and national security architecture by advancing institutional reforms designed to generate, professionalize, and sustain Somali military and police forces, as well as rule of law and justice institutions. Madam President, Somalia is making steady progress towards economic recovery, and efforts are ongoing to improve the country's economic resilience as well as the inclusiveness of this growth. Government authorities have made important strides towards improving fiscal performance and strengthening governance. Decision point under the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative is within sight. The federal government of Somalia now needs to ensure that it achieves the remaining preconditions for reaching decision point in early 2020, which will require close collaboration with Parliament to pass necessary legislation and with federal member states on the fiscal federal framework. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Somalia remains among the most protracted in the world. Currently, 2.2 million Somalis are facing acute food insecurity, and 2.6 million are internally displaced, fleeing conflict and drought. The UN and Somali government together issued a drought impact response plan requesting $686 million US, of which approximately $350 million US has been secured. I call on member states to urgently resource this plan. At the same time, we must focus on legitimate Somali priorities for longer-term development, as reflected in the Recovery and Resilience Framework and preparations for the new National Development Program. Madam President, almost 8 months have passed since January 1, when the UN family was shaken by a mortar attack on our Mogadishu compound. Since that day, we have made substantial progress to enhance the safety and security of UN personnel. Staff security and staff welfare will remain a priority for me throughout my tenure. Allow me to express my appreciation to my deputy, Rezidon Zenenga, since for his leadership in the challenging months before my arrival. I also thank the United Nations Support Office in Somalia for its steadfast assistance to AMISOM, the Somali National Army, and the UN family in Somalia. Madam President, building sustainable peace and stability in a country that has suffered the trauma and shocks that Somalia has experienced over many decades will take perseverance and patience. With the continued support of this Council and the wider community, international community, UNSOM remains committed to assisting Somalis on their journey towards a peaceful and prosperous future. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Swan for his briefing. Now I give the floor to Mr. Francisco Cayetano José Madeira.
Much for inviting me to address this august body on the situation in Somalia. Let me at the outset join my predecessor in congratulating you, Madam President, upon your assumption of the presidency of the Security Council. Since my last address to this council, Somalia's political and security landscape remains encouraging, despite recurrent instances of commotion and political uncertainty. In the past 3 months, the country has witnessed political, security, and economic developments which, if sustainably harnessed, will have a healthy impact on our concerted effort to help end the war in Somalia, return peace to the country, and build a better future for all its people. During the period under review, we have witnessed efforts by the federal government of Somalia to seek to comply with its commitments and milestones on peace, stability, development, and inclusive politics, particularly in relation to the preparations for the state-level elections in Galmudug and Jubaland. In Galmudug State, the period under review, remarkable progress was registered when towards reconciliation, including inter- and intra-clan reconciliation as the basis for a long-term approach to stability. Prime Minister Hassan Kaire's more than a month-long consecutive stay in Galmudug led to the triggering of a process whereby Al-Sunnah wa Jama'ah and other clan forces are being integrated into the Somali National Security Forces. AMISOM, IGAD, EU, UN, and bilateral partners were invited to witness the unfolding of Prime Minister's initiative on force integration and on preparations for the Galmudug Reconciliation Conference in Dusamareb and the preparation of the ground for Galmudug state elections later in the year. The delegation met with some of the integrated Al-Sunnah recruits and was afforded the opportunity to meet and discuss with the Reconciliation Commission about their composition, their mission, the communities they represent, and their representativity level. Prime Minister's effort need to be supported in all aspects, as it provides a unique opportunity to deliver on a united government in Galmudug and functioning institutions, and lasting reconciliation among the 11 clans that make up the population of that state, and much needed peace and stability essential for any meaningful development in that state. With regards to Jubaland, and in the course of preparations for the upcoming elections, AMISOM held separately several meetings with the federal government of Somalia, with the Jubaland state leaders, opposition presidential candidates, traditional elders, and international community representatives, reviewing the deteriorating political situation in Jubaland state with a view to mitigating the far-reaching ramifications and potential escalation of tension among the stakeholders. The key outcome of these engagements was the stakeholders' agreement on AMISOM's role as elaborated in the Security Council Resolution 2472 to help create a secure environment in the build-up to elections, including beefing up the security of Kismayo and its environs. An elaborate plan for the envisaged free, fair, and inclusive election was agreed, and an intelligence committee was put in place. AMISOM, IGAD, under the leadership of my colleague, Mr. Swan, James, we went to Kismayo, and on behalf of the international community, we made efforts to reach out to the stakeholders, the Jubaland Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, and the administration in Kismayo to address key concerns raised by the parties. These efforts are still continuing, and despite the lateness of the hour, it is our hope that the parties will come to an understanding that will produce an inclusive, credible, and peaceful election that strengthens the unity of the people of Jubaland. On the 2021 elections, the key highlights during the period under review were the further development of the electoral law, whereby political decisions on electoral system were considered, a review of the political party law, voter registration, public outreach, and election security. The National Independent Electoral Commission is yet to finalize the pre-voter registration preparations, including the identification of voter registration locations that can be secured with the support of AMISOM. In line with the decision of the AU Peace and Security Council and the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2472, the African Union Commission and AMISOM sponsored and organized a multi-stakeholder workshop in Kampala on electoral security and electoral dispute resolution mechanism directed to the 2020-2021 general elections in Somalia. A draft election plan on electoral security planning was developed during the workshop, which envisages, among other key interventions, the establishment by the federal government of Somalia of an electoral security task force that will develop the electoral security concept for 2020-2021 elections. Meanwhile, AMISOM has proactively put together internal election security cells throughout the regions, comprising its own police, military, and civilian components. Regarding the constitutional review process, mandated bodies held discussions with President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo on the progress so far realized. Public consultations and civic engagement within the states have been planned and agreed, and work towards their implementation is in progress. AMISOM is ready to contribute to this effort by supporting the Somali security forces, which have been tasked with the provision of security to the different teams that will be implementing this program in the regions. The Somali economy continues to recover, and this year's growth is estimated to strengthen to 3% from 2.8% last year. And the inflation could ease to 3% from 3.2%, according to information gotten from the government authorities. The government is implementing the fourth and last IMF staff monitored program that will attract soft loans from IMF and World Bank and strengthen opportunities for debt relief. We believe that this effort needs to be recognized and supported. Madam President, Al-Shabaab remains a serious threat to security and stability across Somalia. To face this challenge, AMISOM maintains presence in the sectors as set out in its 2018-2021 concept of operations. And in collaboration with the Somali security forces, we continue to protect population centers, secure the main supply routes, and provide convoy escorts to ensure safe movement of people's goods, the distribution of humanitarian assistance, and the exercise by the government and the federal member states of their functions of governance. We undertake combat patrols and conduct targeted operations against the enemy. To sustain and enhance current operational coordination among AMISOM, federal governments of Somalia, and partners, AMISOM convened at its force headquarters several operational coordination meetings, and a significant progress has been registered in the areas of consultation, joint planning, and joint operations. In this regard, and in support of efforts of the Somali security forces in implementing the Somalia Transition Plan, AMISOM conducted targeted offensive operations in Koskori and Dar es Salaam of Sector 2, aimed at disrupting and degrading Al-Shabaab. In this context, significant progress was achieved in the implementation of Phase 1 activities of the Somali Transition Plan, including combat readiness, mentoring, and assisting the 53rd, 143rd, Eagle, 27th, and Reki battalions of SNA. AMISOM and SNA conducted joint operations that, apart from Sabid, Anole, and Barire, towns that were liberated in April and May, these joint operations also led to the capture from Al-Shabaab of the towns of El Saline, El Gelo, El Wadigle in the Lower Shabelle region between June and August 2019. Our interaction and collaboration with the UN Mine Action Services, UNMAS, is vital and indispensable. It is getting tighter and stronger as we progress deep into the enemy territory. Thanks to the work of this important UN agency, many lives of our soldiers are saved and their physical integrity safeguarded. And this is also important in mitigating the threat posed by the IEDs. I also want to highlight here the important collaboration and cooperation and support that AMISOM is getting from UNSOS. This support is what makes us move, what makes us achieve what we are achieving. I want here to express my recognition and thanks to Madame Filipetto for her proactive, very receptive, and amicable handling of business with AMISOM. In terms of reconfiguration, AMISOM has reconfigured in space and forces. In this regard, due to operational tempo, AMISOM has established new forward operating bases in El Saline, El Gelo, and Audegle. On the other hand, AMISOM Sector 1, Sector 2, and Sector 3 have already established mobile forces which are proving to be very effective in keeping the enemy on its toes and far away from the main population centers. Relatedly, AMISOM Police has mentored 3,251 Somali police personnel deployed in 31 operational police stations in Somalia on various policing themes and provided operational support to enhance the delivery of professional, responsive, and robust policing services across Somalia. Similarly, and in line with the Somali Transition Plan, AMISOM provided capacity building support to the Somali Police Force through the conduct of refresher and specialized training, including community policing and human rights, community policing and de-radicalization, and training of trainers to enhance policing skills as part of efforts to facilitate the gradual transfer of security responsibilities to the Somali security forces. In a bid to support the protection of rights of vulnerable persons, AMISOM Police offers co-located with the Somali Police gender focal points officers for mentoring and sensitization. 970 Somali Police Force and federal member states police force officers were mentored and sensitized on numerous sexual and gender-based violence themes. AMISOM maintains civilian sector teams in Kismayo, Johar, Beledweyne, and Baidoa, implementing Mission Implementation Plan 2019 and engaging with federal member states leadership, civil society organizations, and key partners, including UN agencies in support of the military and police in stabilization efforts aligned to Somalia Transition Plan and in implementing stabilization programs. Madam Chairperson, as we do these things, we strive to ensure that our operations are conducted in strict compliance with applicable international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and the United Nations Human Rights Due Diligence Policy. To this end, during the period under review, AMISOM conducted a series of pre-deployment trainings and in-mission trainings on international humanitarian law